Hi everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop. Recently I was commissioned to build a tea chest for a friend of mine, and I thought I'd do a video series outlining how I build this chest, from dealing with the design and all the requirements on that side to executing that design and then finishing the product. To start out, I'll talk a little bit about the design requirements. So my friend who commissioned me for this project sent me a few design requirements and some pictures of things that he liked, and from there we came up with an actual design for the piece. Primarily he wants it to be able to hold 18 different kinds of tea, or have 18 different places for tea, or there'll be 2 spots for where the tea will go. There'll be a lid to the box that holds 9 teas on top, and then there'll be a drawer that holds another 9 teas. He also wanted, if possible, an extra drawer to hold teaware, spoons, cups, things like that. If that was possible, if we could work that into the design. And the design that I came up with, we can incorporate that. The first thing I'll talk about though is sizing the piece. So when you're building any piece of furniture or box or anything, you kind of have one or two dimensions that you kind of need to abide by. So if you're building a table, for instance, you're going to want to have it be sized for the space that's going to go in. If it's a hall table, maybe you want it to go between 2 doors or a wall. You want it to be a certain length, and then all the components are derived from that main dimension. In this case, this is more of an inside-out build, since the dimension that is most critical is the size of a tea bag, or a little tea bag packet. So there's a couple different ways that we could look at this. So if we want to have 9 of these laid out, there's a few ways that you can do that. If you're looking at the box, you could have them laid in standing up, and then they're really easy to grab out. But the downside to that is you can't see what the tea is. The other way is you can lay them down flat this way or this way, for instance. And then that will change the main dimension of the box and how it's going to look. The first iteration of the design was with the tea bags standing upright. I thought that might be a little more convenient because you could just pull them out real easily. The other way you could do this was them on their side. You can still pull them out this way. But if we took a look at this design, it's really just too tall. With the lid, it would be over a foot tall, and I thought it just looked a little too tall in the scale. You can see in this depiction here, I made the bottom drawer big enough for some teaware as well. So moving on to the next design, that was with the tea packets laying down this way. Yeah, this way, flat. That's a pretty common layout that I saw in some of the commercially available ones. So if we take a look at that layout here, I think that looks a lot nicer. It's not quite as tall, and the nice thing with this design is that we could actually add that bottom drawer for teaware, and that's what I came up with here, and this is the final design. So a question that I get asked a lot is, do I plan my projects, and if so, how far do I take the plan? So if you take a look at this drawing of the tea box, you can kind of see how far I take it. I use SketchUp just to give me the rough dimensions of what the piece I'm going to be making is going to be, and more of a tool to make sure that everything's going to fit and line up, and that there's not something I can't see ahead of time. So for instance, in this sketch, you'll see that I haven't drawn any of the joinery because I know what it's going to be, and I know I can account for it when I go to build it. Since I don't use this as any kind of a cut list or anything like that where I'm set into those dimensions, I use this as more of a working model just so I can get my rough stock dimensioned, and I can go from there. If we look at the model, we can see that I have a top area that the tea will sit in, as well as the first drawer, which is the same size as the top, which will hold another 9 different kinds of tea. And then beneath that, I have a larger drawer, which should be able to hold a teacup or 2. So then with all of this, the whole piece will be about 9 1/4 inches tall, 9 3/4 inches wide, and 11 1/4 inches deep. I think that's a pretty good size for a tea chest that's going to hold this many different things. So the next thing I'll talk about is getting the stock ready, or selecting the stock. When you make a box, or when you make anything really, something that really sets us apart, or sets our woodworking apart from things that are commercially made, is our ability to pay more attention to detail. One of the real detail pieces that you can pay attention to pretty easily is grain orientation, grain direction, and grain flow. What does that mean? So if you're making a box, there's a couple different ways that you can cut your pieces to get the most grain uniformity. The first way here, as you can see, is you would cut your pieces sequentially from a board. Here's a side, here's a front, here's another side, here's the back. So that'll give you some really nice grain flow around these corners here. Here, here, and here. And the only downside with this method is that this one back corner, or one corner at least, will not match up the way the other three do. Now this might stick out a little bit depending on the wood and depending on, well, who's looking at it, I guess. A little bit better way to do it is to take your board and resaw it into two pieces, or if you have two boards that are book matched from the same log, that would also work. But the whole idea is to give you two pieces that are book matched, and then with that book match, you can fold it all open like this into a box, and now you have grain continuity around all four corners. This is a little more work and a little more involved, but it does yield better results. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to use this method for my box because the stock I have isn't going to be thick enough for me to get my half-inch thickness for my box pieces out of it after resawing it. I do have stock that is sequentially off the same log, which would give me that same effect, but that's not dry yet, so I'm not going to be able to use that as an option. So I'll be using something like this. The only difference here is, instead of having one joint that doesn't quite line up, I'm going to do it so that the two back connections don't quite match up. The reason that I'm comfortable doing this is the stock that I have is all from the same tree, it's all from the same log, so although the grain won't match up perfectly, the color certainly will. And here's kind of why. This is a small project. It's a great use of small pieces, some small scraps. And I've had this piece here kicking around for some time. This is the side of one of my spice boxes that I screwed up on probably about a year ago, and I've been saving it as a reminder to always check your setup. So I'm going to use this for the back piece, and then I have another board from the same tree that I'll use for the front and the two sides. I think it'll be just fine, and you probably won't be able to notice once it's all done. So looking at the model again, we can see that the front is made up of a few different pieces. Something we can do there as well, as far as grain continuity goes, is to make sure that all those pieces come out of the same board. So for instance, if this was my front, I would have my top piece here, which is the side for the cubbies, or the T cubbies, and then the next piece here would be a drawer front, and then there'd be I guess it's a divider, or a blade, a drawer blade, and then you would have your bottom drawer, and then you would have the bottom blade for the case. Now if all those are cut from the same board, it would look really nice to have all that grain running together. I think doing the front like that is going to be a lot more important than having those back corners line up, and I think it's going to give an awesome look. So that's all for the design, and at this point I'm going to start milling up my stock. I already have this piece of walnut here I'm going to use, like I mentioned before, and I have that other board ready to go. So I'll mill those up, and I'm also going to mill up my secondary material for the insides, which is going to be some maple. Again, it's a great time to use some offcuts that you might have lying around. So that's all for the design. In the next video, we'll actually start doing some woodworking, milling up the lumber and cutting the joinery. Thanks for watching. And if you guys have any questions or comments about anything I talked about today, about the design here, please leave a comment. I always appreciate those. And until next time, happy woodworking.